I used to be accused of, this gets back to being the only one, I used to be accused in the community because they would say the Case was an elitist, racist school. And they based that on the fact that they didn't have many African Americans, they didn't have many African American faculty. And they would say to me, I can't understand why you're there. And I said, because somebody has to open the door. Someone has to leave a crack. And we brought in, if you look at the pictures at our school, you start out, you don't see very many faces of color at all. But by the time I left as dean, we had a lot of faces of color. And I think that that's working with the interdisciplinary as well. I spent some time, and again, this was Joyce Fitzpatrick who sent me off to Africa to start a master's program in nursing at the University of Zimbabwe. And then I did a bachelor's in Uganda. So I spent a lot of time internationally and getting to know what people are like. Because when I left for Africa, they said, make sure you take plenty of food, peanut bars, that kind of thing, because you can't eat the food. Well, they don't understand that Southern Rhodesia was Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was Southern Rhodesia. They had some of the best foods you ever want to eat. So I didn't really have to do that. But the other thing that I learned was how eager people were for higher education. And we had, in 1 week, we had someone come in and teach these 18 students how, Diana went with me, how to use the computer and do word processing, and they learned it. And they were brilliant. And you've never lived until you hear them discuss Martha Rogers' theory as compared to Rosella Schlotfeld's and so on. I mean, they knew it better than I did. But it was just amazing to get to know that we're more alike. And one of the things that I learned in Sigma Theta Tau when we had the Arista meetings, we found that we held conferences all over the world to talk about nursing, and we found that nursing is more alike than it is different. That nursing is a caring experience, and that nurses want to help. And we found that it didn't matter what the color of your skin was or your background, your language. That's the other thing. They spoke the King's English better than I did. I have to tell you one thing that's funny. I was there at a hotel one night in Zimbabwe, and they were laying out the red carpet. And I said, who's that for? And I said, they said, the president. And I said, Clinton? They said, no, it was Mugabe. So the next night, they were laying out the red carpet again, and it was for the prince from England. He was coming because, that's what they do. They travel all over the place. And so they laid out the red carpet, and suddenly, all of these Africans appeared in green plaid kilts with bagpipes. I never thought that I would have an experience like that. And one of them said to me, we just love bagpipe music. They love bagpipe. So I'm just showing you that sometimes we think we're different, and we're not as different as we, pretend to be.
I need to make sure we take a couple minutes before I ask you about your legacy and take home. I know that you've been married and raised kids through most of this, and so how have you balanced that?
Well, with great difficulty. I'm not here to say, boy, that's an easy thing to do, but I do think that you have to have a personal life or you can't have a professional life. I mean, that your personal life has to be in order for you to succeed as a professional. Otherwise, you have the guilt that's always there. I remember when I was grading papers, as teachers always do, and my daughter, I have 2 daughters, and this was Andra, and she was about 2 or 3 years old, and she was doing somersaults and saying, look at me, Mommy, look at me, Mommy, and I'm grading papers, and I'm saying, So finally, I dozed off, and someone was shaking me. She said, it's okay, Mommy, you can grade your papers. She thought that was... But I met going to Cleveland looking for the vultures on the step. When I found one, it was pretty nice. And my husband has always been very supportive of when I got all my degrees, bachelor's, master's, PhD, since I was married. And it's because he was very helpful, and helpful in a way that he thought I was doing the right thing. And I think that's what was important, not that he always helped out. I mean, he didn't scrub any floors, I can tell you that, but he was. But one morning, he was getting my girls off to school, and the youngest one woke up with bubble gum in her hair. She had bubble gum hair all over her face, and he had to get it out so he could get her to school. And that's a story they always remember. Mom was away at school, and Dad was getting the bubble gum out of Karen's hair. So, you know, and so that I always involved the kids. When I was working on my PhD, we'd study around the same table, or I'd get up at 5 in the morning while they were quiet and study. But I remember one other time we were going to take a little trip, and I was getting in the car, and I heard my daughter say to my husband, "Dad, she doesn't have any papers with her." So my family is always shared in some of the successes. I bring my kids along sometimes to some of the awards that I've gotten and things like that. And so my one daughter is a nurse, but the other daughter said, "No way, I'm not going into nursing." So she is a claims adjuster. She calls me up and says, "Mom, if you got lumbago, what is it you're supposed?" I mean, so she's always asking for questions about, you know, workman's comp and things like that. So that's how I did manage. I tried to, you know, be involved in their school projects, and it's not an easy thing to do. I think you have to just get rid of the guilt and just say, "Hey, I'm a teacher. This is what your mother does. This is what your wife does," and have people participate. And there is a certain amount of juggling and trying not to feel guilty. You try to get as involved or stay as involved with your family as you possibly can. Sometimes you need to get away from your family, and that's why when I went on sabbatical, I left them all, and I went down to Americus, Georgia. Spent my time in Walmart.
She really did. It's the only
That's it.
store in town you can really shop in.
That's right.
Well, I would just like you to say a little something about what you hope your legacy will be as a leader, as someone who's been on the front line in developing geropsych.
Well, one of the things that I like is that we do have now at CASE, and it's everywhere now, that people understand Gero, and they understand the importance that if you've seen one old person, you've seen one old person. That doesn't mean you've seen them all, and that there really is a science and a lot of research that needs to be done to help older adults. And we've come a long way. You know, at first we said they didn't get depressed. Now we realize that they do get depressed. And we said that old people ought to be sitting on the porch in a rocking chair. We say, no, they ought to be running up and down. I mean, we've got so much more science now behind some of the kinds of activities that we do with older adults. So that's part of my legacy in terms of understanding geriatric mental health, and to say that older people are important, that we don't have to think that in the future, because people are getting older, that you have a whole bunch of decrepit people that are going to suddenly descend upon us. We're going to have to do something about that in terms of helping them. One of the things that I find is that you can put someone in a room that's 60, 70, 80, 90, and you're hard put to tell what age the person is. And it's like Satchel Paige always says, how old would you be if you didn't know how old you were? And that we've really started to look at older people in a different way, and they're saying that they're very important. And I like that. I also like some of the programs that I started at CASE as a dean, and that was to, we have a flight nursing program. That's the first one of its kind in the country. We just had a woman who served in World War II, Dorothy Ebersbach. And you know, they had women that flew the dummy planes that people practiced on. They never gave them any honor until a couple of years ago when Obama did present the medals, and she got one. And so she donated, what is it, $4 million to the school in order for us to do flight nursing. And flight nursing is really catching on. It's a real science in terms of knowing what you're doing. If you want to keep someone alive as you bring them from the curbside to the bedside is one of the slogans that we use. The other thing that I like, I think that nursing is you have to have the compassion, and that it should show wherever you are. If you're a nurse and you're a caring nurse, that whatever you do, it should come through. If you're teaching with students, I think students in particular need to have that caring relationship. I don't think students should be afraid of their instructors. You know, we came up in the day where you trembled. I remember in diploma school having when my instructor had to come with me to do, what was it, post-mortem care. You know, we used to do that crazy thing where you wrap time up with bandages and put their teeth in and all that stuff. Scared to death of her. And she says to me, now make sure you get 2-inch bandage. And I had said on there 2 inches. I said, is this 2 inches? I mean, the kind of fear of God, I think that nurses need to move away from that. Our legacy is to look at the evidence beneath the practice and to help people be what they can be, rather than being, as a lot of instructors were back in the, as we say, back in the day. And then I think that you're looking at your students more as colleagues, and that you're able to help them. I love mentoring students. I can't tell you how many dissertations I've been on, or master's thesis, and to see them, you know, see them get it and grasp it. I mean, there's a certain amount of joy in that. When I was dean, and I liked being the dean. I want, you know, I used to say, oh, I don't like leadership, and I didn't want to be the dean either. They called me and said, you know, we'd like for you to be the dean, and I said, no. And I said no like 6 times. And I got up one morning, because I do believe in spirituality, and I opened my Bible, and it opened to the page where God is talking to Joshua, and he says, Moses, my servant, is dead, and you're going to lead, and be strong and of good comfort, and I will never leave you. And I said, that to me was a clue. And so I called up and said, okay, I'll be the dean, but only 18 months. I stayed for 10.5 years, because I think you can stay too long. I think you do as much as you can do. We had an endowment of, when I left, it was close to $70 million.
14 shares.
You know, you leave while things are going better. We had enrollment up and things like that. And, but I remember them saying, okay, we think we need to do a 360 on you. You know, anybody, you know what that is, a 360, where they ask everybody under the sun what they think about you and so on. And I had a executive coach, because we had a new president that believed in executive coaches, and none of the deans would take him except me. I said, oh, I don't mind having an executive coach. So the first thing he did was this 360. And mine came out to say that my biggest problem was I was too nice. And I thought, that's not so bad. but it fits into what I believe is the kind of leadership. And some people would come to me and say, you know, you're just too nice. And I'd say, that's because they want me to be nice to them, but not nice to somebody else. So it's a really thing. But I loved working with the faculty and seeing faculty change, and I love to see the students. And it's just been a great experience for me in putting it all together. And I wouldn't change being a nurse. I think that nursing is a wonderful profession. I am now teaching undergrads, and I'm teaching them the foundations of the discipline. I was teaching in class the other day, and I said something about, you know, in 1990, and they said, hey, we weren't even born then. And that says to me, okay. I get the picture.
In your master's class. Yeah.
Or they came up to me and say, who is, they said to me, Esther Lucille Brown, who is she? What did she do? I mean, you know, it's just really interesting to see how they see nursing today is so different than it was back in the day when we hid. And I know there are a lot of male nurses, but we went to a great extent to hide femininity. Remember, you had to put aprons on and bibs on and caps and black stockings and low-heeled shoes and long sleeves. It has a lot to say about what they thought about women in terms of the role in the profession. Now they come into class and they say to me, well, now you're going to have to teach those students. I said, no. I said, they need to learn nursing. They learn to know it's a science. They need to learn it's an art and a science. And I am not in class to tell them how they should wear their hair. That's not what the foundations happens to be. So it's been a really nice. And then recently I took on another course. They assigned me to do an online course. Well, I am technically challenged because I was a dean. I had 2 secretaries. They never let me near the computer. My one secretary was male. He's from India, and he used to say to me, "No, you can't. I won't tell you anything because if I do, then what would I do?" So I said, "Okay." But I since had to learn Adobe Connect, and I had to learn that if I see the students, they can also see me, so I had to learn to sit up straight. I lost a student one day, and I said to her, "Too bad, because I can't help you. You're just gone." So it's been a really fun kind of thing to be. I thought when I stepped down as dean, I would just not, just retire, but I didn't feel like that. I still had energy. I still had students that I had for their dissertations, and I thought I would just keep going. So the other thing I have to say is I never read in the Bible any place where God said retire. He said rest. But when he retired you, he took you on over. So I'm not looking forward to doing that. Besides, I think the students will let me know when it's time.
Right. Well, I think it's about time for us to wrap up. And is there any last word you haven't said that you'd like to share? Or people, I'm sure, at the reception can talk with Dr. Weichel. Yeah. You might want to ask her about how you get $2 million for an endowed chair by sleeping over.
I'm going to shoot you. I have to tell you about that. When you do endowed chair, when you're a dean, you go out and you court all these people and you tell them what the problems are, and you bring students along so they can tell you the story. But the development director and she really believed that I should do a lot of traveling with her, so that's what I did. So we went to visit I say young man, he was an older man in Santa Monica, California. And his wife had been a student at the School of Nursing, and they loved the School of Nursing. And his Dear Ruthie, he loved Dear Ruthie, and so we'd go out and spend time talking to him. So we called and said, "We're coming out," and he said, "Well, you have to stay in the nursing home." He was in assisted living. It wasn't just a nursing home. He said, "Because I'm allowed to have guests." And he said, "You need to come and spend the night." And we said, "Spend the night?" Because we were going to go out afterwards and have a drink. Like a gin and tonic. He said, she said, "Oh, his feelings will be hurt. We have to go." So we went to the nursing home, and it wasn't bad. We spent the night in a room. She had a room, I had a room. And the next day he was so happy. He took us around to meet everybody at breakfast. And he'd say, "This is my Dear Ruthie's dean." Now, I wasn't her dean, but you know how that went. And he was just nice. So the second time he wanted us to visit, we said, "We're not staying overnight. We have to go." We did that. But when he died, he left us $2.5 million plus $54,000 for scholarships. So I always say it's not bad for sleeping around in a nursing home.